All right, let's get into it, everyone. It's the Donovan Live Postgame Show on a Wednesday evening. I'm Dave DeNatale. That's Jim Donovan. The Donovan Live Postgame Show, as always, is presented to you by our friends at Master Pizza. And, of course, the answer to the Master Pizza, where is Master Pizza? I got an email from Russ Mitchell today saying, with them on live on Lakeside yesterday, going, "Where's my pizza?" Yeah. Mike LaMarca, the challenge has been put out to you. We need pizza. But we can tell you about Master Pizza. When you order, use your app to do so. Download the app, get those pizza points. That's Master Pizza. Taste above all.
There are reports tonight after our standard Channel 3 weigh-in that a lot of us do each and every day to make sure that we are hitting our weight, that Alexa Lee, Holly Strano, and Michael Estimate all put up to 3 pounds after
that
Pizza.
Feast. Yeah. After that feast. Well.
Now during Donovan Live, the actual show tonight, I dropped 3 pounds because the studio was so hot. Really, if you have a high school wrestling team,
yes.
Okay, and you got to have the kids make weight, bring them into the Channel 3 studio, and they will get there. Believe me, they don't have to wear the Bill Belichick rubber top. You just come in, and you'll drop the weight immediately.
Yeah,
those kids will make weight.
Just like this. Yeah. Guaranteed. All right. We can really start now to turn the page a little bit here on the Browns and start really thinking about Monday night. You've had all sorts of radio commitments today, including the Dog Pound Radio with Bernie Kosar. As you've thought about what the Browns have to do getting ready for Monday, kind of put a bow on last Sunday and kind of your takeaway thoughts as we start thinking about the Jets.
Well, they were not the team that I think that we saw in the preseason and in the training camp practices, and that's the bad part, because the team that we saw in training camp looks like a very good team, a very solid team, very physical team. Somehow they came out of their skin last Sunday, and I don't know if it was being too excited for the moment, but they were not themselves. And by being that and playing that way, they played right into the hands of the visiting team, who really came in very, very focused on things. I mean, they really came out of themselves, and they can't do that. Yeah. I mean, they have a tape now, a film, as they say, to take a look at that and say, hey, listen, we can't do that. And it was everything. It wasn't just the penalties. It was the way they played defensively. Yeah. And it was especially the way they played offensively. They got pass happy. Yeah. And they got play action fake happy. And there's a very, very talented running back sitting back there in the backfield, and they have to ride him.
Yes.
And what was told to me just before the start of training camp was that really he's going to get 25 carries a game, but not when you're 1st and 20 and 2nd and 23 and 3rd and 16. He's out of the game plan. He's out of the game. And I think that's what they have to do. They have to really bring themselves to identify who they were and who they shouldn't have been last Sunday. And I think that's the basic premise.
Somebody brought this up, and I wish I could remember if it was Mary Kay or Dan Lobby or somebody at Cleveland.com or one of the other beat writers in town.
That is a website?
That is a website, one of the other websites in town. But somebody brought up a point that, and I remember you and I talked about when you got back from Indianapolis, the second day of those 2 days of practices, there was extra chippiness going on between the Browns and the Colts out on the practice field, and it resulted in fights, and just it was rugged, it was physical, and it was uber physical, and it's the point that was made was that maybe the Browns should have recognized at that point that there was going to be a problem, that maybe when push comes to shove, we need to turn down the valve here on our team a little bit, and they didn't do that. Thoughts on that? Did we see warning signs maybe that we didn't notice then?
Well, I mean, but they were, they were lauded for the way they practiced on that Thursday by their head coach and by the coaching staff. He didn't really like the way they practiced on the Wednesday. He felt that they played at the Colts pace, which he didn't like, and he wanted them to be more physical, more chippy, and to unify. And I think he was thrilled on that Thursday afternoon when the practice came to an end and they were getting set to play the game on that Saturday afternoon coming up. But I think that, he kind of pushed them to play that way. So I think they did what he wanted them to do. Now, if there has to be an about face or kind of an editing of what they did and bring it back a little bit, then I think that's on him.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll get to the offense in a second, but thinking about the defense, and I even asked you about it when we did the Monday morning after further review. I thought the Browns blitzed more against the Titans than maybe we thought we were going to see because of the talent on that defensive line. And maybe some of it was dictated by the way the game was going, but you expect maybe that they might kind of think a little differently about how they're going to work defense with a different type of offense coming up in Darnold and company?
Yeah, well, they're going to have to play the run first because Le'Veon Bell is there, and he played every play of the game against the Buffalo Bills. He never came out, okay?
Well, he had a year.
I know,
he
but
had
that's
a year
pretty
to conserve
amazing.
energy.
He had 20 months, actually. That was the last time he had played, and he played very, very well for a guy that hasn't played in a long time. I mean, we saw a lot of guys that hadn't played in a couple of weeks, and they didn't play well. He hadn't played in 20 months, and he looked really good. They're going to have to play the run, and it's probably going to be more pronounced than the game last week against Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis and having to play Marcus Mariota. I think the Browns went in blitz heavy. You're right, they did, and they blitzed a great deal. And I think the reason they did that because they smelled blood in the water, and the blood in the water was that going into the game, Tennessee had an unstable offensive line. Their best offensive lineman was suspended. They were putting Dennis Kelly there. He had missed a day of practice. The right tackle, Jack Conklin, had missed a day of practice. Kevin Pomfield, the starting guard, was out. He didn't play in the game. So I think they went, hey, let's go.
Yeah.
Now, the problem was, and the most effective unit that really saved the game for Tennessee, their tight ends. They dressed 4 of them, and they were extra offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And they did a terrific job. There were 5 buses of players that went down to First Energy Stadium for the Titans. One of them was dedicated to the tight ends. I mean, they were that important. They got their own bus.
Delaney Walker and company. He
I mean,
it.
there were 4 of them that played really well in the game. There was the kid Pruitt. There was this other kid. That they had 2 other guys, and one kid was from Harvard, and they had Delaney Walker. I mean, they had 4 tight ends, but they used them so effectively because they said, "Yeah, we're not sure about our offensive line."
During the broadcast, Jack has this point here on Facebook. During the broadcast, they said at one point, I'm sure radio and TV both said this, Sunday, the most penalties the Browns had in the game going all the way back to 1951. Now, Jack's question is, how do you think Paul Brown reacted to that versus the way Freddie Kitchens reacted to it after Sunday's game?
Well, I think he went and invented the face mask. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sure Paul Brown, who was a tactician.
Stickler for details.
And details and fundamentals. I don't know.
Especially
when
your team's the defending champ. The Browns won the NFL title in 1950. I can't imagine he liked the fact his defending champs did a game like that.
I don't know. Did they run gassers back
Yeah,
then?
right.
I don't know. I really don't know. I would imagine. I don't think any coach can accept that, and I would imagine that this has been addressed. I don't understand why it wasn't addressed more forcefully at halftime.
Yes,
because they had I think they were over 100 yards at halftime.
Yeah, they were. I think at 9. I think it was like 9 for over 100.
Yeah.
At the
so
half.
I don't understand why nothing else had to be said in the locker room at halftime. Let's knock off the penalties.
Yeah, clean it up, and we can win this game.
So and they were big ones too.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of, and they came out. Now they came out right away in the third quarter, and they got another roughing the passer penalty called on them. So I don't think whether it's Paul Brown, Freddie Kitchens, Bill Belichick, or anybody else, Bill Parcells, or anybody, nobody wants penalties, period. But never mind that number.
Yeah.
18. That's worse than a first preseason game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
A first preseason game, you get all the false starts and the defensive holdings. These were biggies. When you're up at 182 yards, and remember, a couple of them were declined.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were over 20. That's unheard of, and that's a recipe to lose.
I mean, I could get with the with the rule changes, the double block or the crackback block.
Oh, I did that too.
I mean, I can let that go. But it was the roughing the passer over and over and over again. And it's like, wait, what is this? It's just that was the takeaway for me. It's the discipline, and it was just that players that have been around this game long enough and know better didn't know better.
Yeah. If you had said to me that the kid from BYU, Sione Takitaki, played in the game, and he is well known for being a big-time hitter with a great motor, but a motor that is always at the highest acceleration. He picked up a bunch of penalties. I would say, well, I mean, he is as advertised, and he's going to have to pull back. But he didn't play.
No.
I mean, he's had a hamstring injury since the Redskins' first preseason game. You're right. These are veterans. I mean, this was Richardson and Whitehead, and it was Myles Garrett and people like that that picked up these penalties.
And then, of course, Greg Robinson on the flip side with the kick that got him ejected. Now, Nicholas wants to know: is it a sign of the coaching staff not having either control of the team, or not being able to handle the discipline? Is that a reflection on the staff, or is it a fluke? I guess I would say, Nicholas, we're going to find out. If this is a habit, then I think it is. Maybe that.
Yeah, I didn't see any of this, and honest to God, Nicholas, I was there every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw none of this, and there was one day where they got into a little bit of a fracas. It was Chad Thomas, I think, that got into the fracas the first day that they were in pads, and I'll tell you what, he ran them for like 20 minutes after practice. And the message was, hey, I'm not going to tolerate that. We're not going to do that.
Right.
And so I would say leading up to the game, I would have said, no, they'll be airtight and they'll play by the rules and they will not kill themselves. And then I'm as shocked as anybody.
Yeah.
I really, for somebody that saw them every day that they were out at practice, I did not see that coming Sunday.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. We'll certainly have more time with tomorrow and get ready for Monday night's game as well. But I wanted to close out. I feel like we do this show every year, or a similar show every year on 9/11. But I always think it's an interesting point to sit back a little bit on September 11th, because there are always, Jimmy, with us, there are stories about with sports that touch September 11th, and the images of the Browns' first game after September 11th, the images of your local high school having the first football game after September 11th, President Bush throwing out that ball during the World Series. Right. Put it in perspective for you, just kind of, what do you remember most about that time covering the Browns, doing this job, covering the Browns, and trying to find normalcy in a time where there was no normalcy to be found when it comes to sports?
Well, it was they were getting set to play the Steelers that week over in Pittsburgh, and I can remember we did the coaches show on Monday night with Butch Davis at the I think we were still at Damon's.
We still at Damon's over in Middleburg Heights.
Yeah. And I mean, it was all okay. Here we go, and Butch was a go guy. Yeah. And this was his first year.
Yeah, and he was excited. Everything was exciting. Everything was exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And and this was, he was trying to really get into the Browns-Steelers thing. And so then the next day, which was an off day for the players, and then they would be back on Wednesday in full earnest to get ready for the Steeler game. But on the Tuesday, it was a Tuesday when it happened. I mean, then it was like, what's going to happen?
Right.
First of all, is there going to be a game? And at first there was,
yes.
And then the NFL said, no, we're not going to play. And I'll tell you who was great during it. Al Lerner. Al Lerner was exceptional. If you remember, Al Lerner was brought in by President Bush at that time to come in, and they formed a very hurry-up special committee to talk about what they were going to do as far as security was concerned at big events like the World Series and like the NFL games, because then they were worried that terrorists would hit major crowd-attended type events. And certainly at that point, college football, the NFL, the World Series, all of those things were on the docket because you're into September and going into October. The other thing that I'll remember about it was that Al Lerner then committed a fund to pick out one police officer and one firefighter.
Yes.
And the family of each one of those people. And if they had children, he was going to pay for their education and support them. I think it was close to $70,000 a year, and then pay for their education up until when the child or the children were 21.
Yes.
It was amazing. So we went a year later. We went to New York, and we visited with the family of the stricken firefighter, and I have to tell you, it was unbelievable.
That was right for the Jets game, right? Because they were playing the Jets that week when they visited.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it was really unbelievable. Now, the police officer was a female police officer, and the firefighter was a young guy, and he was working overtime on that day. He should have been home. But he was working overtime because one of his kids was making their first communion, and he wanted to have a first communion party, so he wanted to make a little extra money so that they could have the party and afford the party, and that's why he was working that particular day in the towers and got killed.
Yeah. When the Lerner family sold the team to the Haslams, that was part of the condition of the sale, was it not? That they were going to continue?
I believe so,
I think that they were going to continue.
Yeah, there were a couple of contingencies. Don't touch the helmet.
Yes.
The statue of Al Lerner remained out in front of the facility in Berea. And I think that was the case. It was, but it was unbelievable when we went to the widow's home for the firefighter and the young kids. I walked in, myself and Chris Coons, our camera guy, we walked in, and the woman was very shaky about having us in, and a little boy, very, very young, came up to me and said, "My dad died in the terminal tower."
Wow.
And it was just unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's you think about Al Lerner with that. Who better? I mean, a man who was a Marine, who was that was very important to him. And of course, when you have the former director of the Secret Service on your staff as the director of security,
Loomer Letty.
Loomer Letty at the time. So that I'm sure you always want to pick his brain when you're trying to think about security and what's best for stadiums and facilities, things like that. So it makes a lot of sense that Al Lerner would be somebody that the president or commissioners would want to talk to about that.
I have to tell you, and I sat down, he granted me a one-on-one interview. I loved Al Lerner. I just thought he was great. And I really think the course of the Browns would have been much smoother if Al Lerner had not been stricken with brain cancer. But anyway, going back to it, I remember he granted me a one-on-one interview. In fact, he asked to do the interview about him being appointed to this commission. And I asked him this question, and I said, Mr. Lerner, were we a little bit asleep at the switch? Did we get too comfortable and we didn't feel that we would ever be attacked on our own soil? And he really took great offense. He was taken aback, and he went, "No, I don't think we were asleep at the switch. I just think it's such a different world now." And he was very, very troubled by what had happened.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a part of the solution, and I think in some ways he probably was.
Yeah. I think about that weekend. There was no sports, no college sports, certainly no college football, no NFL football that first weekend. I think Major League Baseball was still.
The Indians were stranded.
The Indians were stranded.
Kansas City?
Somewhere in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So all we had was high school football. And there was a question whether or not the OHSAA was going to play the games. And most teams, I was still covering Lorain County high school football at the time. Most of the teams didn't, actually there was one team that still practiced on September 11th in the afternoon because the coach felt he wanted the team to be as a family, be together, grieve together, and then go home and be with their families. But most everybody went home and did what they did. But I was in the little town of Wellington on that Friday night for Wellington and Midview, a great little local rivalry game. And Jimmy, the only time I've ever really gotten broken up when I've heard the national anthem was just this Wellington marching band was playing the anthem, and you just, at that moment, I think all the tension of those last 4 days kind of went out with me, and it's like you feel like an American, and maybe for a moment felt normal again, and we can do a football game, and it ended up being one of the best games of the year, and I still always look back, just how that little village, that little town of Wellington came together to have football and to have a moment where we could still just kind of embrace a local normalcy of high school football during what was such an awful time. And we still try to pick up the pieces even today when we think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think when the Browns did finally come back the following week, they played the Detroit Lions here and won.
Yes.
Sean O'Hara caught a touchdown pass.
And I bet you he still talks about it with all his NFL Network guys.
Yeah. I know Doug Deacon constantly talks about his touchdown reception, so I'm sure Sean does too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I just wanted to take a moment as, later on tonight here on Facebook Live, we'll see the tribute in light from New York City, and we're all still thinking about, what happened on September 11th. It's sometimes important to talk about how sports played a role in it, because it was important for us to take a deeper glance into how so many lives, the lives of the people we cover were affected too.
There's a fantastic documentary, and maybe you have seen it, and it was done by Major League Baseball, and it was in the aftermath. Remember, the Yankees became very, very important to the city of New York because they made it to the World Series. They ended up losing the World Series in a heartbreaking fashion.
But they were going for four in a row. They were going for 4 in a row.
Yeah, that's the one where they're 3 outs away, and Mariano Rivera, who would have ever thunk it, couldn't get the outs out in Arizona in the 7th game. But it's an amazing, amazing documentary about how the only way people could get away from 9/11 in New York City was by watching the Yankees in the World Series. So it was amazing. I mean, the towers were still down and smoking, and the firefighters were still searching, and all the first responders. And they would go back after these 20-hour days. And they would walk through the tunnel when everybody would be clapping for them, and they would get into the firehouses, and they would watch the Yankees.
And every game that was in the Bronx
was unbelievable.
Went like extra innings, last at bat. I mean, I think 2 of the 3 games that were in New York were last at bat, home run, walk-offs. I think by the Yankees. I think Brocious had one.
Yeah.
And, Jeter might have had the other one.
Yeah.
I mean,
he did. Yeah.
That was one of the most incredible series. You're right. That documentary. I can't remember what it's called.
I think it's called something like Baseball. At 9/11. It's something in connection with that. But it's an amazing. It's just absolutely, it's a phenomenal piece of work. Very sad, but very to the point. But Rudy Giuliani is featured in it a great deal. He was the mayor of New York at the time and a huge Yankee fan. But it was really something. Really hit you in the heart.
Yes. And also, Buster Olney has a book, The Last Night of the Yankee Dynasty, about that too. That I highly recommend to the ESPN writer. Okay, that will do it for us tonight. Again, hashtag, as they say, never forget. We'll have more coverage of September 11th from New York coming up here a little later on tonight on Facebook. Jimmy, we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
And thanks, everybody, for watching. This has been the Donovan Live Postgame Show, as always, presented by Master Pizza, right here on WKYC's Facebook Live and YouTube.
All right.
All right.